The first call went to voicemail while I was being rolled through the emergency doors. The second call rang until my hand slipped off the phone. By the ninth call, I had tubes in my arm, an oxygen mask over my face, and a nurse saying, "Stay with me, sweetheart. Keep your eyes open." I remember the ceiling lights passing above me one by one, white, 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 like camera flashes at the end of my life. And all I could think was my parents are not answering. Not because their phones were dead. Not because they were asleep. Not because they were trapped somewhere without signal. They were ignoring me because my sister Madison needed help moving into her new apartment. Later, when my mother finally looked at those missed calls, she did not cry, she did not ask if I had been scared. She did not say, "I am sorry." She said, "You always pick the worst time to make everything about you." That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. And it was also the moment I started collecting proof. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 32 years old when I learned that family can watch you bleed and still ask why you are being dramatic. For most of my life, I had been the useful daughter. Not the favorite. Never the favorite. Madison was the favorite. Madison had bright hair, bright teeth, bright excuses, and a talent for making every disaster look like someone else's responsibility. When she wrecked her car at 19, my parents bought her a new one because she was too upset to learn a lesson. When she dropped out of college after one semester, they called it taking time to find herself. When she married a man she barely knew, they paid for the wedding and told everyone she was brave for following her heart. When I got a scholarship to nursing school, my father said, "Good. That means we do not have to pay." When I bought my first used car, my mother said, "Do not expect us to help if it breaks down." When I worked double shifts to pay my student loans, they said, "Claire has always been independent." Independent. That was their pretty word for abandoned. Still, I tried. I showed up for birthdays. I paid for dinners when my father forgot his wallet. I watched Madison's two boys when she needed a break, which somehow meant every Friday night, most Saturdays, and half the Sundays in a year. I told myself it was normal. I told myself parents love children differently. I told myself that one day, when I really needed them, they would come. Then came the Tuesday in October that took every lie I had built and burned it down. That morning started like any other. I woke before sunrise in my small townhouse outside Columbus, Ohio. The air was cold enough to fog the kitchen window. My coffee maker hissed on the counter. My scrubs were folded over the chair. I had a 12-hour shift at Riverside Memorial, and I was already thinking about Mrs. Alvarez in room 406, who liked her tea with 2 sugars and called every nurse my angel. I remember touching my stomach while I brushed my teeth. A sharp pain twisted low in my side. It was sudden, hot, and mean. I froze with the toothbrush in my mouth. Then it passed. I stood there, staring at myself in the mirror, pale under the bathroom light. "Stress," I whispered. That was the answer I always gave myself. Stress from work, stress from bills. Stress from my family, stress from being the person everyone leaned on while pretending I was made of concrete. I went to work. By noon, the pain had become a knife. By 2, I was sweating through my undershirt. By 3, my charge nurse Denise found me gripping the medication cart with both hands. "Claire," she said, "you look like paper?" "I am fine." "No, you are a nurse, which means you are the worst patient on earth. Sit down." I tried to laugh, but the room tilted. The next thing I remember was Denise catching my elbow and shouting for help. They took me to the emergency department in a wheelchair. I kept apologizing. That is what I did when I was in trouble. I apologized for needing care. I apologized for making people pause their work. I apologized for existing too loudly. The ER doctor ordered scans, blood work, pain medication. I called my mother first, no answer. I called my father, no answer. I texted them both, "Mom, Dad, I am in the ER. Something is wrong. Please call me." 3 dots appeared under my mother's name, then disappeared. I stared at the screen with my heart pounding harder than the pain. A reply came 6 minutes later. "Can this wait? We are helping Maddie move today." I wrote back with shaking fingers. "I am in the hospital." No answer. Denise took my phone when they pushed me toward imaging. "Who are we calling?" she asked. "My parents." She looked at my screen, then at me. "They know you are here, Les. And they are not answering." I did not answer. That was answer enough. The scan showed a ruptured appendix, an infection spreading faster than anyone liked. I remember the surgeon saying words like emergency, perforation, sepsis risk, ICU after surgery. The sound in the room changed. People moved faster. My name got said more often. Consent forms appeared. Someone asked if I had an emergency contact. I gave them my mother's number. Then my father's. Then Madison's, even though every part of me knew she would not answer either. I called again before surgery. No answer. Again after the anesthesiologist spoke to me. No answer. Again when a nurse held the phone near my face because my hands were shaking too badly. No answer. 9 calls. 9 little chances for my parents to choose me. They missed every single one. When I woke up, the world was soft and broken. A machine beeped near my head. My mouth was dry. My abdomen felt like someone had filled it with glass. There was a tube in my nose. Another in my arm. My throat burned when I tried to speak. Claire. A voice said it was Denise. Not my mother. Not my father. My coworker, my friend. She had stayed after her shift. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. There were shadows under her eyes, and she was holding my hand like she had been holding it for a long time. You are in ICU, she said gently. Surgery went okay, but you scared us. I tried to ask for my parents, but only a rasp came out. Denise's face changed. That was when I knew. They did not come. I whispered. She squeezed my hand. No. My eyes filled before I could stop them. I had imagined many things in my life. I had imagined my parents forgetting my birthday. They had done that. I had imagined them choosing Madison's comfort over my plans. They had done that too. But I had never imagined waking in intensive care and finding a coworker at my bedside because my own parents had decided a moving truck was more urgent than their daughter's body fighting infection. The next morning, my mother finally called. Denise had left to sleep. A young nurse named Patrick held the phone for me because I was too weak to lift my arm. Claire, my mother said. Her voice was annoyed, not frightened. Mom, I breathed. What is going on? Your father said you called a bunch of times yesterday. Patrick looked away. I had emergency surgery. A pause. For what? My appendix ruptured. I was septic. I am in ICU. Another pause then, she sighed, not cried. Well, how were we supposed to know it was serious? You just said hospital. I closed my eyes. I wrote emergency. We were carrying boxes, Claire. Madison's elevator broke. Your father almost threw out his back. I thought maybe the medicine had confused me. Maybe I was hearing wrong. Maybe my mother was not comparing my surgery to my father carrying a sofa. I could have died, I said. Her voice sharpened. Do not be dramatic. You did not die. That sentence became a stone in my chest. Do not be dramatic. You did not die. As if the only valid emergency was a funeral. As if surviving meant I had no right to be hurt. She said they would try to stop by later. But Madison needed help assembling the boys' bunk beds. My father got on the phone for 30 seconds and told me to listen to the doctors. Then, in the background, I heard Madison laugh. I heard her say, "Is Claire still doing the hospital thing?" The hospital thing. I turned my face away from the phone. Patrick ended the call without asking me. Then he set the phone on the table and said quietly, "You do not have to call them again." But I did. Not that day. Not the next. Something in me had changed. I stopped calling because I needed comfort. I started calling because I needed records. That is the part people do not understand about betrayal. It can break you, yes, but sometimes after the break there is a clean edge, sharp, useful. For 3 days in ICU I listened. I watched. I collected. I saved call logs. I screenshot text messages. I wrote down times when my parents promised to visit and did not come. I asked Patrick to document who had called the unit and who had not. I did not know exactly why yet. I only knew that someday my family would rewrite this story, and I wanted the truth to have teeth. On the 4th day, Madison came. She wore oversized sunglasses on top of her head and carried a smoothie in one hand. Her nails were perfect. Her sweater still had a tag tucked under the sleeve. She looked around my ICU room like she had accidentally walked into an unpleasant restaurant. "Wow," she said. "This is intense." I stared at her. "Hello, Madison." She came to the side of the bed but did not touch me. "Mom is stressed out. You really upset her." I almost laughed, but laughing hurt too much. I upset her. "She feels guilty, Claire. You keep making it worse." I was in surgery. And we were moving. Everybody had a hard day. That was when I saw it clearly. Madison did not think she was cruel. That would have required awareness. She thought the world had a natural order. She stood in the center. The rest of us were furniture. She took a sip of her smoothie. "Anyway, since you are stuck here, can I borrow your SUV for a few days? We still have stuff in storage." I looked at her for a long moment. Even the machine seemed to pause. "No," she blinked. "What?" "No. You are not using it." I said no. Her face hardened in a way I had seen many times. The favorite child's shock when the spare child refuses service. "Wow, you are being really selfish." Patrick walked in then with medication. He must have heard enough, because he smiled at Madison with professional politeness and said, "The patient needs rest." Madison rolled her eyes. I was leaving anyway. At the door, she turned back. You know, Mom is right. You always make things bigger than they need to be. After she left, I did something I had never done before. I blocked her number. Then I unblocked it 10 minutes later because a better idea came. I needed her to keep talking. 2 days later, my father visited. He came alone. He stayed standing. He smelled like sawdust and fast food. His face looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was finally seeing him without hope. Your mother is upset, he said. Nice to see you too, Dad. He shifted his weight. You know how she gets? Yes, I do. He looked at the machines, then at the window, then at the floor. Not at me. Hospital bill's going to be bad. There it was. Concern, but not for my pain. For money. I have insurance. Good. Because we cannot help right now. Madison's move cost more than expected. I turned my head slowly toward him. You thought I was going to ask you for money. Well, you usually manage, but illness makes people emotional. Emotional. Dramatic, selfish. All the words they used when I stopped being useful. I asked him one question. Did you see my calls? He rubbed the back of his neck. Your mother had her phone in the car. And yours. I was driving the truck. For 6 hours. He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he said, Claire, what do you want from us? I wanted him to say he was sorry. I wanted him to sit down. I wanted him to hold my hand. I wanted to be 5 years old again, standing in a school hallway with a paper award in my hand, waiting for parents who never came because Madison had a dance recital. But I was not 5. I was 32. And I finally understood that wanting water from a stone does not make the stone cruel. It makes you thirsty forever. I want you to leave, I said. He looked relieved before he looked offended. That told me everything. The mystery began the next morning with a billing counselor. Her name was Elaine. She was kind, careful, and carried a clipboard like it contained secrets. She came to discuss insurance paperwork and emergency contact authorization. Your mother is listed as your primary medical contact, she said. I know. And your father as secondary. Les? Do you want that to remain? No? I said it so quickly she looked up. No family. Put Denise Harper. I have her consent. Elaine nodded and made a note. Then she frowned. Also, I need to confirm something unrelated to this visit. Did you recently request access to your long-term disability benefits? I stared at her. My what? She turned the clipboard slightly. There is a pending inquiry attached to your employee benefits portal. Someone requested information about early payout options if you became medically unable to work. The room went cold. I did not request that. Elaine's face changed from administrative to serious. Then I suggest you contact HR as soon as you are able. That sentence opened a door under my feet. I had been betrayed emotionally. That was painful, but familiar. This was different. Someone had been looking at money connected to my illness before I even entered the hospital. I borrowed Patrick's tablet and logged into my employee portal. My hands shook from weakness and anger. There it was, a benefits inquiry submitted the day after my surgery. The security question had been answered correctly. Mother's maiden name. First car, childhood street. Things my family knew. The request had not gone through because it needed two-factor authentication on my phone. But someone had tried. And I knew exactly who needed money after a move that cost more than expected. I called HR. I changed every password. I froze my credit. Then I checked my bank accounts, my retirement account, my car title, my insurance beneficiaries. That was when I found the second door. My parents were still listed as beneficiaries on a small life insurance policy I had taken out at 26. Back then, I had no spouse, no children, and still believed my parents were the safest people in my life. The policy was worth $250,000. I sat in my ICU bed staring at that number until it blurred. If I had died, the people who ignored 9 calls from my ICU bed would have received $250,000. I changed the beneficiary to a charitable trust for emergency medical assistance. Then I printed the confirmation. Denise came by that evening with soup and clean socks. I showed her the benefits inquiry. She read it twice. Claire, she said softly, this is not just neglect. I know. Wu would know those security answers. My family? Do you want my honest opinion? Les. Stop thinking like a daughter. Start thinking like a witness. That became my rule. A witness does not beg. A witness records. A witness watches the people who believe they will never be questioned. When I was discharged a week later, my parents did not pick me up. Denise did. She drove me home, filled my fridge, and slept on my couch the first night because I was too weak to climb the stairs alone. My mother texted at 8:12 p.m. Glad you are home. When you feel better, we need to talk about your attitude. I saved it. Madison texted next. Are you seriously mad over calls? Grow up. I saved that too. Then came my father. Your mother cried today. Hope you are proud. I saved everything. 3 weeks later, I was still on medical leave when the family meeting happened. They did not call it a family meeting. My mother called it Sunday dinner. She said my grandmother had been asking why I was absent. That was the first lie. My grandmother had dementia and had not recognized me in 2 years. I went anyway. Not because I wanted reconciliation, because I had a small recorder in my purse, a folder in my car, and a lawyer named Rebecca Stein waiting for my call on Monday. Rebecca was not a criminal lawyer. She handled estate disputes and elder financial abuse cases. I knew her through the hospital. She had helped a patient whose son tried to sell her house while she was recovering from a stroke. When I told Rebecca my story, she had gone quiet. Then she said, "Families who ignore emergencies often do worse things when money appears. Bring me proof." So I did. My parents' house looked the same as always. White shutters, perfect lawn, a porch swing my father had built for Madison's engagement photos, not for sitting. Madison's new SUV sat in the driveway with temporary tags. Temporary tags. I paused. Madison had just moved. Madison had complained about money. Madison had asked to borrow my SUV. Now Madison had a new SUV. Inside, my mother had cooked pot roast like we were a normal family. The table was set with the good plates. Madison's boys were playing video games in the living room. My father was carving meat. Madison sat at the table scrolling on her phone. No one asked how I felt. My mother kissed the air beside my cheek and said, "You look thin. Major surgery does that." Her mouth tightened. See, that tone. We sat. For 20 minutes, they talked about Madison's apartment. The building had a gym. The boys' room had great light. The neighbors seemed classy. Madison complained about the cost of furniture and how hard it was to be a single mother, even though her ex-husband sent child support and my parents paid half her bills. Then my mother set down her fork. "Claire, we need to clear the air." I put my hands in my lap. "Okay, you hurt this family." There it was. Not, "We hurt you." Not, "We failed you." You hurt this family." My father stared at his plate. Madison leaned back, ready for the show. "You punished us for one busy day?" My mother continued. "You blocked your sister. You changed your emergency contacts. You embarrassed us at the hospital." "I embarrassed you." "People talk, Claire." "Nurses talk?" "Yes," I said. "They do." Madison scoffed. "Oh my God, you love playing victim." I looked at her. "Did you try to access my disability benefits?" The room went silent. My father's knife stopped moving. Madison's face did something small and quick. Most people would have missed it. I did not. "What?" she said. "Someone used personal information to request early payout details from my employee benefits account while I was in ICU." My mother's hand went to her necklace. "That is a serious accusation." "It is a serious action." Madison laughed too loudly. "You are insane." I turned to my father. "Did you?" "No. It came out too fast." "Mom, absolutely not." "Madison," she smiled. "Maybe the hospital made a mistake. Since you were so busy almost dying." My mother did not correct her. My father did not flinch. The girl in me waited for someone to say, "Madison, that is cruel." No one did. So I opened my purse and took out the first printed page. "This is the timestamp from the benefits portal." I placed it beside my plate. "This is the IP address used for the request." Second page. "This is the location match from the internet provider." Third page. My father's face lost color. Madison stopped smiling. "And this," I said, sliding the last page forward, "is the router name from Madison's new apartment, provided to my attorney after a preservation request." My mother whispered, "Attorney?" Madison stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You got a lawyer." "No," I said. "I got tired." My father looked at Madison. "Maddie?" She threw up her hands. "I was just checking." Mom said Claire had a policy or benefits or something, and if she was not going to be working, we needed to know what options existed. My mother snapped, "I did not say to log into anything." "But you said we might need help." I sat very still. There are moments when families reveal themselves by accident, not in dramatic speeches, in careless sentences. "We might need help." Not Claire might need help after nearly dying. We them, their bills, their favorite daughter. My father's face had turned gray. "Linda," he said to my mother, "what policy?" My mother looked at him, then at me. I smiled without warmth. "Oh, Dad." "She did not tell you." My mother's eyes flashed. "Claire, do not." I reached into the folder again. "When I was 26, I took out a life insurance policy. I named you and Dad as beneficiaries, $250,000. My father sat back like I had slapped him. Madison whispered, "What?" My mother said, "That was private." "No," I said. My life was private. My medical emergency was private. My accounts were private. You made all of it family business when someone tried to access my benefits while I was in ICU. My father turned to my mother. You knew about this? She told me years ago. My mother said. I remembered. You remembered after she almost died? I was scared. That almost made me laugh. Scared. My mother had been scared apparently in the very quiet way that involved ignoring calls, assembling bunk beds, and checking financial possibilities. Madison pointed at me. This is ridiculous. You are making us look like criminals. I looked at the recorder in my purse. Its tiny red light hidden by a scarf. No, Madison. You are doing that all by yourself. My mother's voice dropped low. You listen to me. Families do not threaten each other with lawyers. I stood slowly. My incision pulled, but I did not sit back down. Families answer the phone when their daughter is in ICU. No one spoke. I placed one final document on the table. I changed the beneficiary. My mother went white. The money now goes to a fund for patients whose families abandon them during medical emergencies. Madison's mouth fell open. You gave it away. I made sure none of you could profit from my death. But my father put his face in his hands. For the first time, he looked ashamed. Too late. My mother stood too. You ungrateful girl. There it was. The old spell. The sentence meant to shrink me, but it did not work anymore. Ungrateful for what? I asked. For waiting alone before surgery, for waking up in ICU with a coworker holding my hand, for being told I was dramatic because I survived, for having my accounts checked while I was too weak to stand. My voice did not break. That surprised me. You taught me something, Mom. You taught me that being related is not the same as being safe. I walked out before anyone could answer. The next weeks were chaos. Madison sent long messages claiming she had only been curious. My mother called me cruel, unstable, greedy, attention-seeking, and possessed by bitterness. My father left one voicemail where he started to apologize, then turned it into an explanation about stress, family pressure, and how your mother worries in strange ways. I sent everything to Rebecca. Then Rebecca sent a letter, a formal cease and desist for unauthorized account access harassment, and further attempts to obtain information about my finances or medical benefits. She also contacted my employer's HR security team. They completed an internal report and confirmed that the login attempt had come from a device associated with Madison's apartment network. Because no payout occurred, and because I chose not to press criminal charges immediately, it stayed as a documented security incident. But Rebecca made one thing clear to them in writing. If there was another attempt, another login, another forged authorization, the matter would go straight to law enforcement. My family did not believe I would do it. That was their final mistake. 2 months after my surgery, the church held its annual winter charity dinner. My parents had gone for 27 years. My mother loved that dinner because it gave her an audience. She could wear pearls, bring a casserole, and talk about the importance of family values while ignoring the daughter who had learned to drive herself home from school sick at 12. I was not planning to attend. Then Denise showed me a Facebook post. My mother had written it. Some families suffer when one member chooses bitterness over forgiveness. Pray for our family. We are heartbroken, but we will keep loving even when love is rejected. Under it, Madison commented some people fake emergencies for attention and then punish everyone. Sad fake emergencies. I read that phrase 3 times. Then I called Rebecca. Can I respond publicly? Rebecca said, you can. But do it clean. No insults, no emotion you cannot prove. Truth is stronger when it does not scream. So I went to the church dinner. Not alone. Denise came with me. Rebecca came too, not as my lawyer officially, but as a friend who enjoyed pot roast and accountability. The fellowship hall was warm and bright. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling. People carried plates of ham, green beans, and pie. My mother stood near the dessert table in a red sweater, laughing with 2 women from her prayer group. Madison was beside her, showing someone pictures of her new apartment. When my mother saw me, her smile froze. Madison whispered something. My father looked like he wanted to disappear into the coffee urn. I did not shout. I did not cry. I walked to the community bulletin table, where people posted announcements. I placed a small stack of printed papers beside the donation forms. At the top was one page, a statement. My name is Claire Bennett. In October, I was hospitalized for a ruptured appendix, emergency surgery, and ICU care. During that time, 9 calls to my parents went unanswered while they helped my sister move. Afterward, a benefits account connected to my employment was accessed without my permission from my sister's apartment network. Since public statements have suggested that I faked or exaggerated my medical emergency, I am making the documentation available to correct the record. Attached were not my full medical records. I was not reckless. Rebecca made sure of that. There was a hospital discharge summary showing ICU admission, a call log with numbers and times, text messages, the HR security incident confirmation with private details redacted, and my mother's public post printed at the end. People began reading. Quiet spreads faster than shouting in a church hall. My mother crossed the room like a storm. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed. I looked at her calmly. "Correcting the record. Take those down." "No." Madison grabbed one of the packets and shoved it toward me. "You are humiliating us. You did that when you called my emergency fake." Her eyes were wild. "I said some people. And I brought proof for some people." A woman from my mother's prayer group, Mrs. Harlan, stepped closer. She held one of the packets in her hand. "Linda," she said quietly, "is this true?" My mother's face changed. I had seen her angry, I had seen her cold. But I had never seen her caught. "It is complicated," she said. Mrs. Harlan looked at the call log. 9 calls? My father stood from a table near the wall. "Claire," he said. That word used to stop me. Enough. Enough crying, enough questions. Enough making everyone uncomfortable. This time I turned toward the whole room. "No, Dad, not enough." The hall fell silent. I did not raise my voice. My whole life, I was told to be understanding. Understanding when you missed my school events. Understanding when my savings became emergency loans for Madison. Understanding when my time, my car, my house, and my peace were treated like family property. My mother whispered, "Stop. I almost died. I called you 9 times. You did not come. Then when I survived, you called me dramatic." Someone gasped. Madison said, "She is twisting it." Rebecca stepped forward then, calm as winter. "Everything in those packets is documented." Madison looked at her. "Who are you?" "A witness." That word nearly made me smile. A witness, exactly. My father's shoulders dropped. He looked around the room and saw what my mother had always feared most, not the truth, but an audience that believed it. "I am sorry," he said. The words came too late and too publicly, but they came. My mother turned on him. "Do not you dare." He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "She was in ICU, Linda." My mother's mouth opened. Closed. Madison started crying, but even her tears looked angry. Within a week, my mother resigned from the church charity committee to focus on family healing. Madison deleted her comment, then her whole account for a while. My father came to my house 3 times. I did not open the door the first 2. The third time, I met him on the porch. He looked smaller. "I failed you," he said. I waited for the excuse. "None came." "I know," I said. He nodded, eyes wet. "I do not know how to fix it." "You cannot fix it by asking me to forget." "I know." Maybe that was the first honest conversation we ever had. I did not forgive him that day. Forgiveness is not a vending machine where someone inserts an apology and receives peace. But I told him he could write me a letter, a real one. No blame, no mother's feelings, no Madison. Just the truth. He did. It was 6 pages long. I kept it. Not because it healed everything. Because it proved he could tell the truth when he chose to. My mother never apologized. She sent one message through my father. "Tell Claire I hope she is satisfied." I was not satisfied. Satisfaction is too small a word. I was free. Madison faced consequences too. Her apartment complex received complaints about unpaid fees. My parents stopped covering her rent after my father separated his accounts from my mother's. The new SUV disappeared from her driveway by spring. She sent me one final text from a new number. "You destroyed this family." I replied once, "No, Madison." I stopped funding the lie. Then I blocked her. A year has passed since the ICU. My scar has faded to a pale line across my abdomen. Some mornings it aches when rain is coming. I press my hand over it and remember the girl under hospital lights, trying to call home. I wish I could go back and hold her hand. I wish I could tell her that she was not abandoned because she was unworthy. She was abandoned because the people she trusted had built a family system where her pain was inconvenient. There is a difference. Now my emergency contact is Denise. My holidays are smaller and quieter. I spend Thanksgiving with friends who ask what I need and mean it. I volunteer with the Patient Assistance Fund that received my life insurance beneficiary designation. Sometimes I sit beside people in hospital rooms when their families do not come. I know what that silence sounds like. I know how heavy a phone can feel when no one answers. And when patients apologize for needing help, I tell them what I wish someone had told me years ago. You are not a burden because someone failed to love you properly. Last month, I received a letter from a woman who got emergency lodging through the fund after her husband left her at the hospital. She wrote, "For the first time, I felt like a stranger cared whether I lived. I read that sentence in my kitchen with tears running down my face. That was the revenge I did not expect. Not screaming, not ruining people, not becoming as cold as they were. The revenge was taking the money they once expected from my death and turning it into proof that I survived. My parents ignored 9 calls from my ICU bed because my sister needed help moving. For a long time, I thought that was the worst sentence in my life. Now I understand it was the sentence that saved me, because when they refused to answer, I finally stopped calling. And when I stopped calling, I finally heard my own voice. It said live. So I did. And I made sure the last thing my family ever took from me was the lie that I needed them to be whole.